Hey guys, Adrianne here with a special message before we get into this episode. Okay, so I took a long break. There's so much going on right now, and I could ramble for hours on various topics, but I'm just going to hit some highlights real quick. First, a PSA for y'all. Coronavirus is real, and it is still out there. We're still seeing people get sick as fuck from this. I continue to socially distance, wear masks anytime I can't avoid being in public. I'm wearing my PPE at work. So please mask up, wash your hands. This isn't a conspiracy. Second, I'd like to clarify a few things for my entire audience. Let's just get this out of the way. This may seem like a flippant mention, but I'm trying to cover a lot in a short time here. Okay, so I support the Black Lives Matter movement. I support protest and civil disobedience in the face of corruption and abuse. Trans lives absolutely matter, as do other LGBTQ lives. I think that nurses have the responsibility to recognize and actively dismantle our own prejudices while we advocate for those of us who have it the worst. The most vulnerable populations need us. I also think you need to get your vote in. Your absentee ballot, waiting in line in a mask, download some shit to YouTube and watch it while you stand in line. You've killed time in worse ways. Whatever it takes. We gotta do this. Okay, and more on all that at a later date. For now, we need to lighten this shit up a little bit. Please enjoy the first episode in my attempt to be a weekly podcast. That's right, I said it. Nursing Uncensored is officially now a weekly show. But don't get too excited because I reserve the right to change my mind if this turns into a total disaster. So, and actually this really is the last thing, but this episode that you're about to listen to, I actually was having some technical difficulties. I sound like I'm on a telephone because I am. But the good news is I've just upgraded everything. I've bought new gear. And so we shouldn't have any more problems like this for a while. Yeah. That's enough for me for now. Let's get into the show. Welcome to Season 5. This is Nursing Uncensored. I'm your host, Adrianne Benning, and I invite you to listen in on conversations I've had with real nurses about the crazy and wonderful lives we lead. This podcast is meant to create laughter in addition to serious discussion, and nothing is off limits. We're always honest, but we're not always safe for work. Please listen responsibly.
Welcome to Nursing Uncensored. I am back again today. Welcome back, Q. You are here. What is this, like our third, fourth recording? I've lost track.
It doesn't matter.
You're another member of the repeat guest club here on Nursing Uncensored. So welcome back.
Thank you. I'm honored to be recurring member. I enjoy the conversations we have. I really do. And I think it would be a good one.
I agree. So, what you been up to lately? Let's do a little small talk.
Oh yes. So I am continuing on with my travel nursing. In fact, I'm finishing my assignment here in like the south of Connecticut. It's basically on the border of Connecticut and New York. So, you know how things, knock on wood, are calming down with the COVID situation. So, like 4 weeks ago, maybe, this was like insane. It was like I was all day, every shift was a COVID shift, taking care of COVID patients. And now things are getting better. My assignment's about to end. I'm thinking about heading over to the West Coast. I mean, things are going to change, but I mean, I'm a traveler. What's new?
Yeah, I knew that your time was going to be coming up soon. So West Coast? What can you say anymore? Like where?
Oh my goodness!
West Coast is really long coast. Where are you going? The whole thing, up and down.
I'm going to California. I think there's a friend of mine that lives in Sacramento, so I'm going to go to California. I'm going to hang out with him.
Going to California in the summertime. I feel so bad for you.
Look, listen. My plan was to go to all these other different cities before I got to Cali, but with the COVID situation, I'm like, there's nothing to do in these cities, so I might as well enjoy the good weather. right?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I'm not knocking it. You do what you need to do, but
Yes.
I will say maybe I'm a little jealous. Although Iowa, so we're in the part of the season right now where it's actually like nice. Things are lush and green, and it's like hot during the day, but like cool in the evening. But like, so now is the period where we can like have the windows open. We're going like picking up farmers market good. Like it's real nice, but the danger is that at any moment, our nice temperate Midwestern weather is going to go, and it's going to be 104 degrees with 106% humidity, with like a mosquito invasion, no clouds, which means that I'm going to spare you seeing it. But when I was out protesting the other day, and I was sitting in the center of a concrete intersection, which was blocked off. We were like listening to speakers and didn't even notice that the sun was just cooking me. It was just like, yeah. Geez. So that is the true nature of the Iowa summer. So Iowa's wonderful in the summertime, but we're almost to the point where you can't enjoy it anymore. And you basically like drench in sweat walking from your front door to your car. So I'm just trying to like,
how long is it in that season? I feel like Iowa, I don't think of Iowa as like a hot spot.
Oh yeah. Iowa in the winter is like Arctic, and then Iowa in the summer is like swampy.
Who lives in that state? Who lives in that state? And why? And why?
It's so like April to May. So Iowa, and I'm not going to go too deep into this, but Iowa has like early summer, late summer, dog days of summer, like the last holdout where it goes from like 62 degrees one day to like 94 the next. Mm-hmm. So Iowa, we're notorious for going through all four seasons in one day. So, yeah, that's what's going on here. And I'm still basically self-isolating. So I go to work. If I go anywhere, I'm masked, I'm hand sanitizing, I'm keeping my distance. Some people say like, whatever, it's almost over, it's okay. I run a zero risk game. Like I don't want to be the person that's like, shit, I should have washed my hands.
Right. No, thank you.
Because we're still having new cases here. So
we do have our occasional, but for the most part, things have.
But it's not like overwhelming. Yeah. I will say my hospital has had 0 nurses that have been caring for COVID patients actually come down with COVID. So that I want to give a shout out to my wonderful colleagues at the university, that they have been working under really intense circumstances. And y'all, their hand hygiene and PPE skills are so good. None of them have gotten sick. So just wanted to give that little shout out. So
you guys had the full on PPE the whole time?
Yeah. We, what they did kind of like take it off the shelves and like tuck it away in dark corners on each unit just to make sure that people weren't like walking off with boxes upon boxes. But at no point have I been without PPE. We did change our policies a little bit on how we were using our ISO gowns, and we were conserving those, but now we are back to normal contact isolation use of gowns. We all are required to wear surgical masks. And even though we're encouraged to like wear one for our shift, we are not restricted. Like if yours gets dirty or ripped or wet or whatever, you can get another one. Like we haven't had that issue. We all also have shields, face shields that we wear at all times, which like all of us are kind of like, okay, I'm fucking over the shield thing, but also I'm really grateful that I have that protection. And so if I'm going into a patient room and they're like, I can pop that shield down, I'm good. So
yeah, that shield fogs up real quick. I hate that shield. That shield fogs up. Are you serious?
I'm lucky. Yes. I'm lucky. Yeah, I don't know. Either that or I just I don't know, but I feel like whenever I have a conversation with one of my colleagues, I'd be like walking down the hallway and I'm like, hey, I was just on your patient in room 13. 13. I restarted the pump and helped him to the bathroom. Like, that's how I feel every shift. Like, here, I'll show you. Right here, you can't see it, but like right above my desk, I have like my, every girl's got to have her closet. So I got all my masks here. So
all of the goodies. Got some
Plus,
saying.
I'm kind of like, ooh, the face mask is like a new cool accessory. Like, I've got all these cool patterns, fabrics, whatever. Okay. I'm insane. Whatever. All right. Enough about that. What are we here to talk about today? For real.
The dark humor. Well, we'll talk about humor. Humor
in general. Yeah.
Yes. Talk about just humor and us working in the healthcare field. And it's like, it seems like two things that shouldn't get along, but you need it. They're
necessary. It's the yin and yang. So yeah, let's talk about, in general, humor in healthcare, specifically with healthcare workers. And since we're both nurses, we can focus on nurses, nursing assistants, the people we directly work with. I have less to say about humor among like physicians and other disciplines, just because I don't talk to them as much socially. Like, I don't know what their experiences are. So mostly we're talking about that. And actually, this podcast, Nursing Uncensored, the original name, which was brainstormed with my or what's the word I'm trying to say, with one of my founding nurse members. It was called Medroom Chronicles, Nursing Uncensored. And the reason we called it Medroom Chronicles is because we all, as nurses, you go into that medroom, the door closes, you say what you really think. Exactly. And sometimes that turns into humor and off color. That old cliche of like what doesn't kill you gives you a really unhealthy set of coping mechanisms. So
right.
We're going to talk about that. The benefits and the ills of this kind of humor, how we use it, and in general, some of the like unwritten rules or ethical guidelines that we still have, even within what a lot of people would say is unethical, cruel, whatever. So we're going to talk about that. So before we get into like the dark humor, which can get pretty intense,
spicy,
healthcare workers.
Spice things up.
Yeah, it gets spicy. That's right. But humor in general. Let's talk about humor and why, as humans and nurses, we need humor. What's your take on this? What does humor achieve for you?
So it'd be ridiculous. It'd be absolutely ridiculous if you told someone that you had to go to work, doesn't matter what they do, and you had to be serious from like start to finish. And the only time you can smile about anything or make a joke about anything is when you're off the clock, which is ridiculous. And I don't think anyone has that standard, no matter what the profession is. But the reason we need humor, specifically we healthcare workers and not say us nurses, is because we deal with such heavy things. The emotional load of being a nurse is not easy. When you are taking care of patients who are in excruciating pain, when you are taking care of patients who can't move from themselves and family members are tearing up, and you are emotionally strained every single day. You try to keep it together as best you can. And sometimes humor is your doorway into, I'm going to crumble out under the pressure of the sadness and this morbid situation that I'm in. And it's very important, and it allows you to let loose, and it actually gives you a different perspective on a lot of things we do. And I think most of the time, vast majority of the time, it's a healthy perspective, because yes, these are shitty situations, but it happens, and it will most likely happen to most people, because, no one's going to survive forever. So it's healthy. I think it's a really healthy thing, and it's very important to have.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes when shit at work is so heavy, you're on the verge of tears or frustration or anger or whatever it is that your, feelings kind of manifest as. And then, the nurse, you've got your like buddy at work, or I have my buddies at work that'll come over and be like, I know that such and such sucks right now, but at least your patient isn't shitting every 5 seconds like they were before.
Right?
Now, to the average person, you're like, God, what does that have to do? But as a nurse, it makes me laugh, because I'm like, oh yeah, I do have small blessings. Like, even though this person is giving me a hard time right now, or like I'm sad, or I'm struggling with this suffering that I'm bearing witness to, it is kind of funny that they said, like, at least you don't have to clean up shit. Yes. So these little things that make me kind of giggle, it diffuses those feelings that we get of like the physical feelings of stress. Because what people forget is that stress and witnessing suffering and witnessing these painful, difficult, scary things, especially now when we don't have visitors in the hospital, so our patients are alone. I feel like that's been heightened for me because I feel like I'm dealing with people in more stress and isolation, and they're hurt or they're, trying to recover. And so the physical feelings of like cortisol pumping, it's not just like, oh, you can stop thinking about it. It's that like your heart rate picks up. It's hard for me to eat when I'm stressed because when you're feeling a sympathetic nervous reaction, your body doesn't want to sit down and eat your lunch. You're like, I got 25 minutes to eat. If you're lucky, I got 25 minutes to eat and I am so amped. And so what do? You talk, you laugh, you joke around, you try to diffuse, you try to counteract that sympathetic nervous response. I mean, even me talking about it, I can tell I'm getting like really animated and like jittery because the way it makes me feel is really negative. And so having someone goof around or like show me a stupid TikTok or like that humor can be the thing that kind of deflects me from that path of just vibrating with agitation and worry. So humor becomes like a medication of sorts. Like humor is my Xanax. That is my ankle.
Yeah, look, we all self-medicate one way or another, and sometimes it's jokes. Sometimes it's a joke, right? Everyone, it's hard to be that nurse to wild out and say things at the nurse's station that might be a little off kilter, right? But if you're not that nurse, everyone, at least I know I love that nurse. I love the nurse who says things we're all thinking, right? And there are a lot of things that we're all thinking. And some of them are, a little spicy, but what are you going to do? What are you going to do? When a patient is shit 3, 4, 5 times that they have a diarrhea and it's the worst thing ever, it's okay to make a joke about it. It's okay to make a joke about it.
And I think a lot of it is, what really are we laughing about? Am I laughing at the fact that my patient has diarrhea and their stomach's upset and they're miserable and having diarrhea? So, no, I'm not making fun of that. Am I making fun of the fact that I got the patient tonight that I'm literally so it's circumstantial. It's situational. Laughing at my pain, my coworkers laughing at my pain. That can be funny in the right situation.
Right. And I love, by the way, that you guys called it the Bedroom Chronicles. Well, that was the original name.
That was the original name. Mm-hmm.
I love that because yes. So a lot of the times the nursing station is right in the middle of the nursing, the nursing unit or the floor or whatever. Right. And, especially when you're working nights and things are supposed to be quiet. I know my nursing station on occasion, we try to be good, but on occasion gets a little rowdy and a little loud. Yeah. So that's why I like it that you said bedroom. Because yes, in that bedroom, you all know you got to badge in, badge out, or there's a key lock or whatever. So it's a closed space. It's a closed space. Right. And 90% of the time, it's just nurses in there because we're pulling out meds. So that is a really good place to be a little wild and crazy. Because yes, they have been situations, and we know that some patients like to keep their doors open. And if they are hearing these things, I think that's when things start to get, that's an issue. You guys need to either be quiet.
You got to know your audience.
You got to know and just specifically where you are, right? As
but that's
in the
true
hospital.
Anywhere.
Yes.
Yeah. Like for example, as a nurse, I am conscious not to talk loud. Well, maybe I have done this. When you go to a restaurant, you try not to talk about all the wounds you've seen really loudly because that's impolite.
Yeah, that's why.
But if you're in the med room and you're, you know your audience, but it's the same when you're at Thanksgiving dinner, okay, or whatever family dinner. You know who's at the table. You know which jokes are going to fly and which jokes are going to hit the table and lay there uncomfortably for all to see. So you already are tempering your responses. And I want to also cite, because this is kind of the basis of where this conversation came from me years ago. I think it was 2015. I'm looking at my phone here. The Washington Post article that I sent you. It's a very famous article, and it's called "Nurses Make Fun of Their Dying Patients." and that's okay. And so this is a really long article, and I'm not going to go through it. I want to encourage people to find it. Washington Post, written by Alexandra Robbins. But she talks about, she gives examples and talks about things in healthcare that to outside viewers are really callous or really, like, for example, the term, what did they say? They said that a patient is heading to the ECU, the Eternal Care Unit.
Oh,
insensitive. Like, you don't say that to you. Yeah, I'm just reading the article. Or like some staff members call the geriatric ward the departure lounge. And I'm quoting this article. A gunshot wound is acute lead poisoning. Patient death, celestial transfer. Yeah. So like there's all these words. Like I've heard the nursing acronym FDGB, fall down, go boom. So there are all these things that nurses have in their language. Not all nurses, but there are things that many nurses have in their language that if I said that to a patient's family member, like, oh, we're going to admit you for a FDGB. Well, what's that? Oh, fall down, go boom. Totally unprofessional and inappropriate. But if someone says to me at the nurse's station, hey, Adrianne, are you getting an admission? Yeah, it's cool. I'm good. I've got everything ready to go. It's just an FDGB patient. And they're like, okay.
Right.
But that's like our humor. That's our lingo. Am I glad that person fell down? Of course not. But if it's like my second or third admission of the shift, maybe I need a fucking joke to make this not feel like the shift that's going to break me, you know? Yeah. So we walk these fine lines.
And I love those acronyms. I haven't heard of some of them, but I'm about to use a couple of them. I like them. I like them a lot. And like, that's as simple as it gets, right? I don't know. I feel like I'm like, I don't think there's ever going to be a time where I don't think a fart joke is funny. You know, like
same. I'm sorry, and I'm gonna release some private information here. But the other night, Doug told me that I let out a huge fart, but he knew I was asleep, that I was fully asleep because I didn't laugh. That's what he said.
See, look, listen, I'm telling you, life happens, right? And you know, but people, you said fall down, go boom, right? What do people do on YouTube? All we do is watch people fall down and have accidents. And it's like
America's Funniest Home Videos.
Exactly.
All of the 90s. Like,
right?
Come on.
So of course. Yeah, we end up getting the patients after the video, right? So are we allowed to laugh at those videos? Of course we are. Of course we are. And a lot of the times you get front seating to a lot of crazy situations. And yes, you can laugh at the situation after. We're not laughing at the specific patient. And is it insensitive? Yes. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to interrupt you. We talked about this in our pet peeves episode.
Exactly.
We talked about how we make these jokes and these things drive us crazy, but that doesn't mean we're not going to take good care of our patients.
Absolutely not.
A joke I make, I can make and I've even had patients that are in on the jokes with me. There's this one patient who I'm obviously not going to give any details, but this patient is quadriplegic. And I've taken care of so many patients with quadriplegia over the years, but this one in particular has this crazy sense of humor. And he constantly is making fun of his disability, not in a way that is degrading or demeaning to himself, but just in ways that are funny. I think at one point, I did something, I almost dropped something, but I caught it. And he said something like, if I could use my arms, I'd applaud you right now. Just things like that.
It's kind of sweet, actually.
It is, but things that you can poke fun at it, or patients that have talked about their chest tubes and they're like, I got hydraulics now, that kind of stuff. So sometimes the patients are in on the joke, and even then you need to know your audience. You don't want to be the one delivering or perseverating or continuing to make fun. But if your patient makes a joke and they're laughing, laugh with them for fuck's sake. They're in the hospital. They need to laugh.
Right.
And I've even had patients who have written, I've seen cards or letters from patients that they or their family members have sent back, and they do remember laughing with their nurses. They do remember. And some patients, like some of my cystic fibrosis patients, they're walkie-talkies. You know, they come in, they get their antibiotics, they get their lung treatments and their PFTs and stuff, and then, you know, and then they discharge. But in the meantime, like some of them are such smart asses that, like, if you don't use humor with them, they're like, who are you? Stuffy. Like,
right.
You know? So like those, like I've even had patients that are like, I don't trust her. She doesn't smile. Like
she doesn't smile.
Patients sometimes need that humor, you know? This is one of the things that I copied from the article, is that themes in human behavior are ridiculous and more common than you think. And so our bodies, you know, we say all the time, my massage therapist says all the time, bodies are weird. Because like, you know, I'll be receiving a massage or something, and all of a sudden, like they'll hit a muscle and like my hand will twitch weird. And I'll be like, oh, that, you know, there must be some miswiring or something. And then they said, bodies are weird. And it's true. And so for us to deny that there's some humor in that, even when I'm sick, I find things that are funny, you know, like when you're blowing your nose and you're like, what the fuck is all this snot coming from? Like,
right?
I never knew
the simple
I was
stuff.
so good at this. Like, yeah, just these little things. These are common themes that our bodies do. And for some people, they're funny and they're ridiculous. And we know, like, in our heart that we're not withholding care. Yeah. We're not giving shitty care. But if my patient wants to laugh about something with me, I'm totally cool with that. Or I'll have patients that'll make jokes and then they'll say, oh God, I'm so, and it wasn't even that bad, you know, like off color jokes.
Yeah.
And then the patient's wife is like, oh, Harold, shut up. Don't tell her that joke. But then I laugh because I'm like, I'm a person first.
Right.
Like I didn't come out of the womb with credentials. Like I'm not so
that would have been nice.
Yeah. Right.
Nice. Fuck nursing school. Fuck nursing school forever. Look, listen, I agree. And I'm done with the header that we care about our patients, because I think it's obvious. I think we're deep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. I think with me is, you know, a lot of the times it gets hard when it's a confused patient, right? Because a lot of the times, you know, people will walk onto a nursing station and everyone has a screamer, and screamer, sometimes it's pain, sometimes it's, but a lot of the times it's someone who's confused, right? And when someone who is confused is saying ridiculous shit, right? Screaming at the top of their lungs, we're doing everything we can. They're just confused and there's nothing we can do about it, but just wait it out. That's when I think non-healthcare workers who come, visitors and, you know, family members or just people passing by get really worried, because it's happened so many times.
Because they think you're ignoring them.
Yes. They think you're ignoring them. And you're over there at the nursing station having I'm not even talking about jokes no more, just having like a normal conversation. And obviously everyone hears the patient yelling at the top of their lungs, you know, get Santa Claus out of my room, or I need to get home, or I get out of my car. And like, what do you want us to do? You want us to muzzle the patient, or can we live our lives?
And I've even had patients come up to the nurses station and say like, are they okay? Do you need me to get someone to help them? As though I'm like not. Right. And I say, you know, they're fine. I know it sounds like they're not, but their needs are met. They're safe. They're confused. And they've been yelling like this for 4 days.
Exactly.
Because you can't muzzle them. These patients that are confused and yelling, you also don't want to close the door because you want to hear what's going on. You want to see that, you want to know they're safe. But honestly, after listening to someone scream for 3 night shifts, it's like when patients it's not exactly the same, but like you have a baby with croup or colic or whatever.
Yes.
And they're screaming and they're screaming and they're screaming and they're screaming. Well, there comes a point where you're like, you're either going to break under the pressure, you're going to find some way to cope. And sometimes that way of coping for nurses is being like, you know, like if that patient is quiet for a while and then they're sleeping and then, you know, the patient starts screaming, help, whoever the nurse is assigned that night, because we usually share those patients so we don't burn each other out. Yes. The rest of the nurses will be like, your turn.
Right?
It doesn't mean we hate that patient. We're just trying to keep all our sanity together,
of course,
you know?
Of course. And it's a day-to-day thing.
So,
it's a day-to-day thing, right?
Yeah.
And like people, human beings, I think just people in general are just smart enough to know when is when. But like, I like to bring up the confused patients, because that's the hardest, right? I mean, it's not the hardest, but when you're not
it's
there,
very difficult.
It's very, it's like touch and go. It's very touch and go.
When like, as you're changing their wet brief, they think you're trying to kill them. And it's like, people outside the room hear, help, they're trying to kill me. I'm just wiping the poop off your leg.
Right.
But
so
other people, so then that people start to think that you're just like twisted and ignoring your patient, when it's like, I just can't.
Right.
You know,
yeah,
and one of the things I was going to say about confused patients, sometimes there are situations where you're like trying to like keep your composure and not laugh, but it's funny. Like, I had a patient who kept setting off her bed alarm because she kept forgetting to use her call light. She's confused. So each time I do cares, I leave the room, I say, do you remember what you need to do? Do you remember how to call me if you need to get out of bed? And the last patient I asked that to said yes. And I said, can you show me? And she went... And I could not help it. I laughed.
I love it.
I didn't like crack up. I wasn't like, but I was like, I laughed. Yes. Because it was funny. How often does someone give you eardrums when you ask them to show you where the call light is? You know, like, these things are funny. That's a once in a lifetime
opportunity. That's amazing.
Or like if I have a patient that I know is a smart ass and I have to check their blood sugar, I say, I need a finger from you. And sometimes what does that smart ass patient do? Here you go. And I say, that was your one freebie. You know, like, you joke around. It's okay. Now, if a patient was being aggressive and shitty to me, I wouldn't respond that way. But we got to have that lightness.
It's light.
And like you said, you were just saying, we all know, or we all need to identify where that line is. You don't make fun of someone because of their disability, their ethnicity, their religion, all the things that normally apply in modern society. I am not a stand-up comedian. I am not Richard Pryor. I do not get to just say whatever the fuck I feel like saying on a microphone. I obviously have parameters within which I operate. And so it's like we said in our pet peeves, like, yes, I'm making fun of this. Would I ever not take care of this patient? Would I ever not treat them with dignity? Wouldn't even cross my mind. Like you said, that's a given. We've already established that. It has a place in healthcare.
So it definitely does have a place. And I know I'm a louder person just in general most of the time when I'm in the room compared to everybody else. But another thing that, so this is a legit issue, is when you are in a group of nurses or you are talking to someone else and you and the nurse you're talking to, or you and the group of nurses, everyone's line of where things are okay is at a different level, right? A different place. Mm-hmm. Can we just talk a little bit about, because I know I've probably been the problem in many of these situations, but I've also, there are very, very few times where I thought like, ooh, maybe that's not something we should laugh.
Maybe I went over the line.
Maybe I went over the line, or maybe someone I'm talking to went over the line, but I never know, like, have you been in those situations, and how do you, unambiguously tell a coworker or, apologize for a shitty thing that you said or someone else said?
Yeah. And it hurts. It hurts to admit you're wrong. It hurts to admit you said something shitty. But unfortunately, we're all adults. The same way that if you make a med error, you own up to it. You don't say, like, oh, but I didn't, but this, and then this. No, you say, I screwed up. I forgot to unclamp my roller clamp. The medicine didn't infuse. Like, you own up to it. The same way when you say something that's inappropriate, whether it be a joke, a personal statement that's off color, you have to, if someone calls you out on it, you have to think about it. You have to say, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was, or I'm sorry I was offensive. Like I try not to even do those qualifiers. Like, I'm sorry I offended you. That puts the burden back on them. I try to own up to that. I did say that. I'm sorry that offended you. I will try to keep that in mind as I move through my life or whatever. I'm being cliche, but you got to own up to it. You make a mistake. You hit someone, you hurt them, you say you're sorry. Now, if someone is repeatedly upset about the jokes that I make, when I feel my jokes are benign or not out of line, then I know that that's not my audience. And maybe that person feels differently because they have a different experience or they have a different view. Some people think this kind of humor is abusive. And I say that it can be abusive. The same way me joking about you as a friend, like we're out to dinner, well, I can maybe make a joke about something. If it bothers you and I keep making those jokes, you had a cue. They told you they didn't like it. So we, even as users of humor, we have to not just know our audience, but we have to be able to pay attention to those cues back. And that's part of being nurses. You assess your situation. Does that patient suddenly look like they're upset by what you said? If they are, fucking address it. Say, I'm sorry. I thought we were joking around. I took it too far. I don't really think that. My mouth was working ahead of my brain. I'm sorry. Yeah. You do those things. You just do. That's part of being a grown up.
Yes. And I love how you set it up. Right. So just because right from the get, you're like, I'm not a stand-up comedian. And I love that you said that, right? Because there are very few stand-up comedians. And yes, I feel like once you become them, if that's your profession, if that's what you do that in the setting that calls for, right? Everything outside of that, you need to take responsibility of the things you say. I know right now people, it's with the racial tension, you don't want to talk about that kind of thing, with what's going, when you, especially like during, what's it called? The voting season or election season, you don't want to talk about politics and get out of that stuff, right? So there are a lot of hot topic type situations that, on a different day, this might be funny, but right now I'm a little raw, right? Or I'm just a little sensitive. One of my patients said, I don't feel like making jokes about, the Eternal Care Center or whatever. I don't feel like listening to that right now, right? And when you do hear things or when you do see that you affected someone else, owning up to it immediately, bringing it like voicing your opinions and saying, this is how I feel about a situation. Great. And I know, right now we sound like real marshmallow, social justice. Fuck off. I think if you just care about human beings, you respect when they are bothered. And if you do respect when they are bothered, you own up to it. On the other hand, if you're over here, Mr. I am offended by everything everybody says, at some point I'm going to just be like, look, you might find my jokes or what I do abusive, but if I think it's clear and it's not bothering all the nurses, this is my coping mechanism. I gotta live too. Adrianne, I gotta live too.
Yeah. And you're right. And it is important to know the context because we're not under normal circumstances right now. And even with joking around like things that have to do with our current like racial disparities and race relations, I have friends of color that I can joke around with them. I can be like, white girl coming through. I don't know what the hell you're talking about, but like, can you explain? And they laugh at that. Other people, I would not say to them, hey, white girl coming through. Like, so in all things, like I wouldn't go to my mom and be like, what up, bitch? But I do that with my friend Brad. Like, these are all things that we're constantly gauging anyway. So I think that when it comes to medicine and healthcare, these jokes, and one of the things, so I do want to cite one more article because, it's as much for our patients sometimes as it is for us. And this one article, which I'm going to link in the show notes, has several other links. Like it links to other articles from the National Library of Medicine. And one of the links that I just clicked on is an actual study that they did that's called The Acceptability of Humor Between Palliative Care Patients and Healthcare Providers. Now, for those that don't know, palliative care patients are symptom management. It can be anything from like controlling nausea in a patient actively receiving chemo to providing symptom management for someone who's actively dying within hours to days. So palliative care is a spectrum. But basically, these patients, they're not in the best place they've ever been in their lives.
Yeah.
And according to this study, they did, I think they did 100 participants on a palliative care or residential hospice unit were surveyed. And of the results, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but of the results, 77% of patients valued humor highly prior to and during their illness experience. Despite this valuation, the frequency of laughter in their daily lives diminished significantly as their patient illnesses progressed. Most patients remember laughing with a nurse. 87% of patients surveyed. 87 out of 100 patients said that they remembered laughing with their nurse. A dying patient in bed laughing, to me, is a victory of my shift.
Yes.
Anytime they're not crying, writhing in pain, blunted, that's a victory. So I just want to illustrate by reading this that it's not just nurses going, lighten up, like it's fine. We also have other people that bear witness to this humor and they say, I needed that. I valued that. So I think that we've talked about a lot of different ways this manifests in healthcare, but the bottom line is that this helps a lot of people. And so I think that we need to be constantly reevaluating throughout our careers. Is my use of humor appropriate? Is it hurting anyone? Is it helping anyone? And at the end of this period of humor, am I remembering the humanity of the things that I'm laughing at? You know? Yeah, that was a lot. But that's kind of what I think.
So I haven't even thought about it from that angle, and I think it's huge. I mean, when you're doing your flow sheets, or you're doing your assessment for the day, and you're plugging it into the computer. I don't know what kind of EMR medical record systems people use, but a lot in many of the different hospitals I've worked at, during the pain and comfort situation, one of the non-pharmacological ways of going about it, they literally give you options: TV, radio, music, right?
Humor.
Exactly. And humor,
yeah.
And it's a huge part of it. It's a huge part of it. Just getting someone to think about or laugh at a situation, is just, it makes that situation that much better. And of course it's fun and games and we get the pressure off, but sometimes it's part of the goddamn care plan. Sometimes you need it. And
so my hospital uses Epic. And so when you go into Epic to chart a pain assessment, one of the last fields in that pain assessment is, what did you do? What did you do for it? And the things that are listed are ice therapy, heat therapy, repositioning, cold, distraction,
yes.
Humor, imagery, meditation, deep breathing. These are all things that we can do. And so when I'm doing a pain assessment, I'm trying to think is there some way I can make this person smile? For example, if I have a patient that's in a lot of pain and they want a back rub, and if I got a miracle 2 minutes that I can give them a back rub, I'll give them a back rub. And most people, most people will either make a noise in pleasure, or they'll be like, oh, thank God, or thank you so much. That feels so good. And then I usually say, most people don't turn down a back rub. Nobody's ever angry. Nobody's ever sorry when I rub their, nobody ever says no. And people usually laugh because the same is true of you or I. If I said, hey, you want me to rub your shoulders for 5 minutes? You'd be like, I don't not want you to. This is just human shit. So I think that there's always ongoing discussion to be had. And I think the situation you're in always needs to be taken into account. But please don't ever make me work with a group of nurses that don't want to laugh. The shittiest shift, short-staffed, tired, everything's going wrong, can't find equipment. That shift can be a good shift if I got the right team with me.
Right.
That team often are making jokes. Brad is one of my best friends. He was a nurse that I worked with. He's been on the show multiple times. He now lives in Florida. But one of the things that I miss most is the humor. Like, I would be like, hey, I tried to get this IV. He was like my IV guru. Like, if I couldn't get it, I was like, Brad, can you start this IV for me? And he'd say things like, smart ass comments, or like, I have the hiccups now because I've been drinking carbonated stuff this whole time. But yeah, the jokes never cease to flow. And I knew that he wasn't mad at me. It was just,
I love it.
Okay, yeah, sure.
It's life, but like, I think people get it. I think most people get it. I haven't had an issue with this too often. I think, for me, the only place I've ever seen what nurses consider humor, what nurses don't consider humor, is online. 90% of the time, when things are uncomfortable, and by the way, if someone says something uncomfortable at the nurses station, I don't think it's, you don't want to be an asshole and stand up and be like, oh, you are such a bad nurse. No, fuck off. All right.
Yeah.
The next time you guys are talking one-to-one, just be like, look, listen, I don't think that was too hot. Let's not do that again. Or
and here's why.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is why it made me feel uncomfortable, whatever the reason, your reason for, talking to that person is. But the only place I've seen actual issues with what's humor and what's not humor, like a full-on discussion, has been online. And that's why I just say, you gotta just be careful, because that's where the context is lost. You might be trying to say something, but if you don't explain yourself entirely, you might, lose a few people. And sometimes it's rightly so. Maybe sometimes you need to be told, explained that this wasn't right because of X, Y, Z. And sometimes you take the hits and you'd be like, fuck it, I still stand with what I stand with. So that's the wild, wild west of the internet. So you got to do you.
And regardless of what you decide, you got to think about it. You can't just be flagrantly throwing jokes around. So yeah, I think long live the nursing meme. I could pull up Google right now and find pages upon pages upon pages of smart ass, crass, inappropriate stuff. And there are so many running jokes in the nursing community that some of the jokes are so like embedded in our society, in our culture in healthcare, that like other people don't get it. Like, of course they won't get it because they're not in the, they're not in the system or whatever. Yes. And so there are some things that are like universally known, like everybody jokes about how doctors have terrible handwriting and like, I don't know.
That's really funny because I have
everywhere.
It's so funny because I haven't seen a doctor's handwriting in forever. Like it forever, literally forever. Same. It's like they'll write their name on like a death certificate or some shit. Like, but that's it. Like, that's it. That's it.
Miracle
but no more handwriting
of electronic medical records.
But we told stock shit about the handwriting though.
For me now, it's just the order writing. It's just like when the patient, like we had a doctor the other day write an order for rectal suppository on a patient with an ostomy. So it was like,
oh, well, where are we putting this book?
I don't think it's going to work if I put I could put it in his rectum, but I don't
think things are going to be coming out, boo-boo.
So anyway, things like that like you say to a nurse, like, they just wrote a rectal or med order on this patient, and all the nurses go,
right,
whatever. It exists. That's what it is. So I don't know. I think we've covered back and forth, up and down. There's probably a lot more that could be said, but really, like, this is a truth of nursing. And if you don't like it, that's okay.
Look, listen,
for you.
I'm telling you guys is speak to what you believe. If you believe something is off kilter, you make it hurt, but just do it respectfully, right? Just do it respectfully.
Yeah, for sure.
And we're all thinking about it.
For sure. If nursing humor was like disallowed, like made illegal, couldn't do it, I would have to take down like pretty much every episode I've ever recorded because all we do is laugh. Exactly. Some of the stuff is very serious, but if you can't laugh, what the fuck?
Right?
Yeah, that's my
Thank you for having me on.
Laugh, what
Adrianne.
the fuck? Of course, it's always a pleasure to have you back. Let's do this again very soon. Once you're in Cali and you can talk a little bit about the sunshine, I'll be here covered in bug spray. Try not to sweat through my clothes. It'll be great.
I'm excited.
Yeah. So when do you actually head out west? When's your assignment over?
I'm done here in July. I want to spend a week in Boston with the fam, and then I'll probably head over. So second week of July is probably when I'll start my trip across country because I'm going to be driving. So probably like first, second week of July, one of those 2 weeks. Depends on how long
I'm 4 hours west of Chicago, right off the interstate.
Oh shit! I don't know I don't know what the lockdown laws are in Iowa now. But if I'm driving by, we'll grab a coffee or something.
Yeah, we can keep a 6 foot distance. Like, it's fine.
I like that.
I'll tell you what. If you don't have one, I'll bring you something now.
Of course you will. Look at you go.
All right. Thanks again for joining. Yeah. Happy nursing, everybody. Peace.
Bye-bye.
Here at Nursing Uncensored, we may be, well, uncensored, but we're not unfiltered. Protected health information has been changed and concealed to comply with HIPAA. The things we talk about are from years of experience with thousands of patients, things we've read, stories we've heard. If you think we're talking about you, we're not. Also, we're real nurses here to provide helpful and accurate information, but don't take anything we say as fact without doing your own research. Refer to your state's Board of Nursing, Practice Acts, and your institution's policies and procedures if you have questions about your practice. Lastly, our very strong opinions are ours alone and do not reflect those of our employers, educational, or professional institutions. Thanks for listening, and happy nursing, folks.